When I started this episode, I knew it would be about all things Bollywood and books. But I didn't think that it would end up being so filmy. Let me explain. It's pure coincidence. I had no idea at all. My next guest shares her birthday with Kejo. And this episode is coinciding with the opening episode of Coffee with Carvan season 8. Also, if it can get any more cheesier than that, think of Kuch Kuch Hota Hai's lead characters, Anjali and Tina. The only thing is, our Rahul is books. Let's not waste time and introduce our next guest. My next guest is Anjali Kirpalani, the best selling author of the Tinseltown Affair, 19 Till I Die, Written in the Stars, and Never Say Never. Born in India, she lived in South Africa for 8 long years before she returned to Mumbai. She's been the she's been an RJ and an anchor with ET.now and She the People, and an editor for stylecandy.com, a fashion portal. She scripted successful radio programs for the South African Broadcasting Corporation, or the SABC. She's written for the Oprah magazine and Huffington Post and the likes. Anjali is one of the 300 women to get selected from 10,000 plus women to get pre incubated into the Women Startup Program run by NSRCEL IIM Bangalore. Having done her master's in English literature from the University of Mumbai, she lives to read, write, and discover new places. Let's go and meet her. Hi,
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 Tina.
Anjali. Welcome to Spill Ring Show. I'm so glad to
Thank you.
have you on board here. So we'll talk about your book, the latest book, The Tinseltown Affair. It was quite a fun read. I had a blast reading it.
Oh, I'm so glad you liked
Yeah,
it.
and it left me with a huge smile on my face because I was expecting the story to go in one way, but it ended up in some other different direction completely. So let me start off with the first question. The Queen, like the book is inspired. The chapter names, inspired by Queen songs. So how did that thought process come about, and how did you kind of get this thought that this would fit into the plot line that you were uh,
Yeah.
envisioning?
Yeah. I think music is something that everyone connects to, and we all have these favorite bands. And
Yeah.
like there are times when you're so sad in life, but then you'll hear this song and the lyrics really resonate with you, or the music resonates with you.
Yeah.
So, for my character, I wanted her to have something that is sort of like her one of her unique sort of traits, and it happened to be her obsession with this band Queen.
Yeah.
And of course, I personally love Queen, and then I feel like everyone knows their songs, right?
Yeah.
It's something that anyone born in the 60s,
Yeah.
70s, 80s, like everyone knows Queen and loves Queen's music. And We Are the Champions is such an
Yeah.
iconic song. And
Yeah.
then which is why, like, at the end of the book as well, we've got the whole
Yeah.
song and the
Yeah.
lyrics, because yeah, it's all about literally like you can do it. And that's the kind of sort of motivation this
Vision.
character also needed, because
So
she sets out
Queen was
to,
like a
yeah.
muse for you for this book. Queen
Yeah.
was like a kind of a muse for you.
Yes, definitely a muse. And another interesting sort of the reason that Queen was incorporated is that, with my previous three books, which is Never Say Never, Written in the Stars, 19 Till I Die, they're all sort of, they remind you of songs, right? They're all
Okay.
song names.
Okay.
But 19 Till I Die, well, obviously, is 18 Till I Die is the
Is
Brian Adams
Bride
song.
Adams.
But,
Okay, I didn't know this
yeah,
because I haven't read that. So this was like, wow, where
yeah,
did this come from? Where did Queen come
yeah,
from? But I think people who have read your books would kind of expect
yeah.
this from you.
Yeah,
So
so I
that's
have this, yeah,
interesting.
so music and music and literature sort
So
of
now I need to go
go
and
together.
check your
Oh, you
previous books
must.
now and see.
Oh,
Okay,
for
so this
sure.
was something new for me. So yeah, so Queen was something that you kind of this is the way. I mean, this is your style to mix music
Yeah,
and literature, and it kind of works for your for your style of
exactly.
writing.
Yeah,
And one thing that worked for me in this book was the character of Meghna, who is the lead
yeah,
protagonist, because she comes out so strong, and I feel that you have etched her character so well that we can all
yeah,
feel for her, like we can see us in her, like her
yeah,
falls are our falls, her triumphs are our
mm,
triumphs. So that is something
yeah.
that she instantly connects with you. So is this character based on somebody whom you know, or is this you? Is it
Yeah.
somebody in the industry who is like this? I mean, who is Meg now?
Yeah.
Or is she completely fictional?
Yeah. So I think this is a question I've always asked, and I have been with all my books. And I feel like for anyone who writes fiction, I think whatever characters we sort of create, whatever we write, the plot lines, everything is, at least for me, it's always been a blend of fact and fiction.
Yeah,
And I want my readers to guess what part is actually fact and what is
that's
fiction.
like a
But
fiction.
I think I think there's always a little bit of me in all my protagonists. And so a little bit of background on me. I grew up in South Africa.
Yeah.
And then I moved to India, and my goal was to become a TV anchor. But
Okay.
when I came to India, yeah. So when I came to India, people told me, but in India, you don't have, like how in the US you have Ryan Seacrest, who's he
Yes. Yeah.
specializes in anchoring.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in India, everything's connected. So acting and anchoring is sort of connected.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I actually did. Yeah. So they said just be open to all kinds of opportunities, etc. And so I've actually gone to these acting auditions, and I've kind of so in certain scenes when Meghna is like overwhelmed at
Oh,
an
yeah.
audition where she's seeing so many good looking people around
Yes.
her, and she forgets her line, she gets nervous in front of the camera. These are the kind of things I have experienced. So I think it's sort of yeah. So then definitely I've put in my experiences, and of course then, as I said, a lot of embellishment and fiction happens to make the plot more interesting. But I
Yeah.
think the reason people have always been able to connect with my characters are probably because I do sort of put in a bit of myself or a bit of
Yeah.
my friends, a bit of people I've met, and that's what makes them real. Because I think a recurring theme, for at least for me when I'm creating characters, is that no one is 100% good or 100% bad in the
Yeah.
real world, right?
Mm.
Everyone has shades of gray. So I never want my protagonists, as much as they'll always usually be like 80% like good people,
Yeah.
but they kind of, so Meghna as well, she experiences jealousy. She is jealous
Yes.
when her
Yes.
friend becomes an actress and she
Yes.
doesn't, so which is all normal kind of feelings. No one is going to be like
All
a
goody.
saint and be
Yeah.
like, oh, all well. So we've all felt this sometimes, even though we're happy for our friends. you
Yeah.
you know you tend to compare your lives a bit sometimes, and you
Yes.
do feel that they're ahead. What am
Yes.
I doing with my life?
Yes.
So yeah, so I think it comes in, yes, a lot of my own experiences, a lot of how I have felt, as well as just or a writer's job, which is observing on my own friends and family, and creating characters based on that.
And I think that's why some of the scenes, in the book just make you laugh out loud. Like, when she goes for these acting classes, and that whole chapter, that whole scene was
Yeah,
completely like laugh out loud, where he makes
yeah,
a like she goes to learn something, and then she ends up barking like a dog or woofing like a dog. And,
yeah,
all those
yeah,
things are kind of hilarious because it kind of plays like like a scene in your head.
yeah,
So they're quite
yeah.
enjoyable. Um, One interesting observation that I made while reading the book is you explained, I mean, you've etched Meghna so well, but you've never really described how she looks. So every time
Mm,
in the book, I was like, I was kind of eating, how does she look? Because she goes for these odd auditions, but she doesn't get picked up. But then
mm,
there are guys who find her attractive, and then she gets the best guy on the block, and she has this
right.
amazing life. And I was like really
Yeah,
wondering, what does she look like? What does make
yeah.
what does she look like? I mean, I think that was something that left me wanting to know more in the book, because everything else was etched except this part.
Okay.
Like her dress, what she wore, what she
Right.
thinks, and everything. So was this like a conscious choice, or was this something that you just missed out on?
So I think like in the prologue, actually, if you read, you go back to it, she
Let me
does talk
see.
about how, how she talks about once she turned 15 or 16, she sort of became, she lost her puppy fat and she noticed that,
Yes,
people started checking out. So I
yes.
think, so I wanted to create this thing that she is an attractive girl. The fact that she's come to become
Yeah,
an
now
actress,
see,
she's not
now that you,
obviously delusional.
yeah, now
Yeah,
that you
she,
now that you
yeah,
mentioned it, yes.
yeah.
Yeah, she said that she did lose a puppy fat and all that, and then she's
Yeah.
attractive.
So she's, yeah, she's attractive. I didn't describe her physical features completely because I wanted that to, I think that's the fun of when you're reading a book as well,
Yeah.
right? That you use your imagination. So that I wanted to my readers to know that yes, she's attractive. She's come to become an actress, but you can sort of picture her physicality a
Hmm.
little bit like
Yeah,
however you
because
want to.
this is one detail that got me thinking, like, was it a conscious choice to skip this out, or maybe,
But yeah, I think it was more just to kind of, tell people, of course, she is attractive.
yeah,
And it's all from her perspective. So generally, when someone is thinking about their own selves, they're not going to like sit and be like, I
yeah,
have doe eyes or whatever. So
yeah,
it's more about how she's viewing the world because we're seeing
exactly.
everything through her perspective. And so yeah, that is why there is not that much description of her
Also,
own physicality.
is it more the male authors who tend to describe how a lady looks, the male protagonist looks from the male gaze, and women
Yeah.
authors don't really place that much of emphasis on the external, and we are more bothered about the internal workings of the character?
Yeah.
Is that it,
Yeah,
or is it?
I guess, yeah, it could be a bit of that as well. Because for me, I think, yeah, I think I wanted everyone to just be in the headspace of this character who's,
Yeah,
so put yourself in her shoes. She's come to Bombay. She
yeah.
wants to become an actress.
Mm.
And it's not, like the thing is, I actually remember when I was younger, reading this somewhere and, or like, just coming across this thing that said that every Indian, actually Indian person who's grown up in India, somewhere does grow up with this thought of like wanting to become an actor
Yeah,
because Bollywood is so ingrained in our
true,
lives that we've all grown up watching these stars and
true,
their lives are so, it's like larger than life. So somewhere, even if you never talk about it, everyone has kind of pictured themselves one
exactly,
day being an actor. What would it
exactly,
be like? Yeah. So I
exactly.
think that's something that every Indian person kind of connects with. And it was more about that okay, but not everyone acts on it, right? Some more often than not, we have the self-doubt and we ourselves tell ourselves that this is not going to
Yeah,
happen for us.
yeah.
So it was more about that here's this person, she wants to become an actress, she is going for it, but it is not easy. And this comes, and the fact that it's not easy is something, again, living in Bombay, and I have worked in the media, so obviously, met a lot of people who are kind of struggling actors, some people who did kind of make it to a certain level, some people are still struggling, so you meet all
All
sorts of
kinds,
people.
all kinds
Yeah,
of
and
people.
I think it's just very interesting because for anyone who's never come to Bombay or never sort of lived that life, never interacted with people, it's still all very fascinating, and you're like, what really goes on, like what happens. Whereas people who worked in the media, people who've kind of been in that industry, that then all that glitters isn't gold. There are
Yeah,
a lot of, there's a lot of strange things that happen also.
yeah.
But yeah, but for someone who really wants to make it, of course, people do end up making, if you have the talent and if you are really so inclined. So yeah. Mhm.
Interesting. Um, the next question that has been bubbling in my mind is Bollywood as such, especially in the last few years, has gone through it's gotten a bad rap because of
Yeah.
certain deaths and things like that. So, I mean, the dark of the industry has come to the forefront and it's, I mean, to the audience, especially, it's like the darkest version of it now. Like in
Yeah.
your book, you talk about how the protagonist's mom and dad were not for her going and joining the industry because of certain
Yeah.
practices. But now it's gotten even more darker. So, how much of this perception is true? Because you do come from within the industry. How much of this, how dark is Bollywood, or is it blown out of proportion in the media? I mean, now, I mean,
Yeah.
since, because you do
Yeah.
talk about Me Too and casting couch and things like that, and
Yeah.
I was intrigued by the the stance that you took of the Me Too, because you kind of shown the other side of it, like how.
Yeah.
So I just
Yeah.
wanted to know your take on the practices in Bollywood. How dark is it? Is the perception
Yeah.
true, not true, and to what
Yeah.
extent?
Yeah, I think so. Basically, it pretty much boils down to the fact that there are all kinds of people in Bollywood.
Hmm.
There's good, there's bad, and which Meghna also experiences in her
Yes.
own sort of
Yeah.
journey, right? And which is what I wanted to sort of the message I wanted from the book is not like as I said again, I believe the whole world is gray, nothing is black and nothing is white, 100%. So in this character in this book we have her friend who becomes a TV actor, and at one point when they're talking, she says, oh well, I've never experienced anything shady,
Yeah.
in my sort of it's very professional, everything's fine.
Yeah.
Whereas there is the friend who's a journalist, her friend
Yeah.
Nakul, who's always giving her gossip and saying, oh my god, this
Yes.
person
Yes.
has had to
Yeah.
sort of do a favor for this person,
Mhm.
to get something in return.
Yeah.
So I think the reality is pretty much somewhere in between,
In
where you
between.
will meet all kinds of people. It's clearly, obviously not everyone in Bollywood cannot be like
Same.
a bad, or everyone can't be again like 100% pure. So I think it's somewhere in between. It's really about the people you meet, and it's also about, of course, and that's why, like, I think for me, I just wanted this book to be as real as I could sort of keep it,
But
which is why I wanted my character to sort of address pretty much everything. So in the last few years, nepotism is something that has been
yeah,
spoken about
yeah.
so much in Bollywood.
And you speak
But
about it on the
yeah,
first page itself.
yes. And so she just very casually addresses it, and she says, you know what, like, I wish I had a relative here because it would
Yeah.
be so much easier.
Yeah.
And what's
Yeah.
the big deal? Like,
Yes.
um, which is kind of a stance that, I've also had,
Yeah.
because the fact is today that if you are like a business person's
Correct.
kid, you will end up taking over your parents'
Yeah.
business, and no one is going to raise an eyebrow, right? Like, they'll just be
Yeah.
like, okay, sure. So I don't know why people sort of make, but on the other hand, for a struggling actor, it is very frustrating because
Yeah.
obviously the star kids get all the breaks first,
Yeah.
their journey is easier, all of that. So my whole thing was, I wanted to address all these serious issues that do happen in Bollywood, but humor was something I didn't want to lose, and I wanted to just
Yeah.
look at it from this funny light, and so
Yeah.
that at the end of the day, okay, there's good, there's bad, there's shady things that happen, there are all kinds of people you're going to meet on this journey. But if you learn to laugh at it, it's all actually really funny, because you meet a lot of very interesting characters. And so I try to pretty much cover the whole spectrum with all her experiences. So where she takes part in a reality show, and the kind of thing she experiences there, which is also really funny, because reality TV has become something in the last few years, which is, again, people think of it as a quick way to become
I'm hooked
famous.
onto it. I'm hooked onto it.
Yeah,
Reality
yeah.
shows.
And as much as we laugh about it, it is addictive. So like her experience on that, and then actually taking part in a play and acting in doing theater, and what that is like. So I just wanted to cover pretty much as I could on her journey, to make it like a real journey.
Yeah.
Because I find, like, when you show, I mean, maybe it happens for some people, but really, sometimes even when actors talk, they don't actually tell you the extent to their struggle, or,
Mm.
like the 50 failed auditions, and
Yeah.
that the one that they cracked.
Mm.
So, they'll just be like, oh, I was spotted at a coffee shop and
Yeah.
everything worked out. And you're like, really? But, the actual, like, when
Not
you're
that.
in there, it's not so easy.
Yeah.
So I wanted it to be this very, like, unbiased kind of thing, where she's experiencing everything. And what it is like for someone who has no connections in Bollywood, who really has no clue of how things work, the kind of things you have to do, or experience to get to where you want to be.
I like the build up also, because after one disaster after the other, you really feel so sad for this protagonist. Like, you're like, when will things work out for her, and will
Yeah.
it work out for her? And when it does work out for her, it works out in the most unexpected ways. Like, it's like in a direction that you don't see coming at all. I mean, I don't want to break the suspense
Yeah.
for people who are watching
Yeah.
it, but
Yeah.
it ended on a very sweet, very nice note. I mean, when I opened the book and I saw the Queen connection, I was smiling all along. I was like, yay! I mean, this is something which obviously like my kind of a book, because I love Queen too. So I
Yeah.
was kind of pleased by that. So I started the book with a big smile on my face, and the ending is one of the sweetest I've seen. It leaves you feeling, mushy inside and warm inside. And, I'm like, thank God things worked out well for her, but maybe not in the way that she anticipated, but
Yeah.
all's well that ends well kind of a thing. And then
Like,
you close the book with a
yeah.
very satisfied kind of a feel in your
Yeah,
heart.
and because I think Yeah, I think that's kind of been my experience of life as well. Because as I
Yeah.
said, I moved to Bombay with this thing of I want to become an anchor.
Yeah.
And for me, personally, my mom always told me, you're a good writer. Why don't you become an author?
Yes.
And I always thought I would write books, but I
Yeah.
just thought I'll do it much later in life.
Yeah.
I said, oh, I've got all the time in the world. While
Yeah.
I'm young, I want to kind of be in the media. I want to be this
Yeah.
anchor. And I did work with ET. Now I did get to do all of those
Yeah.
things as well. But when I sit back and look at my life as well, I mean, if you would have told me, like 15 years ago that, you're gonna go to Bombay and then you're gonna become an author, I don't think I would have
Believed it.
predicted it or seen things working out the way they have.
That's
And so, like, just like Meghna, I think in my time in Bombay, I've done a bunch of things. I've like tried various things. I've, worked on things that didn't materialize. And I feel like I just wanted to also just normalize that too, because, it
correct.
is part of the journey. You cannot,
Yeah.
it's very few people who really like the very first thing they do is a big success and, like life has worked out that well. For the rest of us, you're just kind of like finding your way. And this is something which I remember when I had moved to Bombay once, and I was very like frustrated. I was just like, oh, things are not working out. And I was sitting with this uncle of mine who's kind of like spiritually inclined. And he just like drew this graph and he said, you know what? There are some people and their life goes like straight, smooth upwards. But there are some people, it goes squiggly, wiggly, squiggly, wiggly. But for all you know, that for that person, they might end up, further ahead than the other person.
Exactly.
And yeah, and if I sit and think back to my life, I feel like there have been so many squiggly wigglies, and I'm still not exactly where I want to be, but at least I feel like, yeah, I'll get there. Like now I know that, things do work out. Some things may not work out, but then again, that's life.
That's okay.
And that's the kind of message I've always wanted to give people, that don't give up. In the end, things work out the way they're meant to work out for you.
And I really like the protagonist's mother also. She's hilarious when she comes out of nowhere and then it goes on in these clothes. I mean, I loved
Yeah.
her. She was like, you could see your mom's in her as well. So,
Right.
so very relatable characters, I would say. And uh, the Me Too movement is also something that you've handled in a very, these are controversial topics, right? Nepotism
Yes.
and casting
Yeah.
couch and Me Too movement, especially the Me Too movement was a stance that, you would not see it about it in, the other side of the coin where there could be, fake cases being put on the small fishes. I mean, maybe not the big
Yeah.
A-lister stars,
Yeah.
but the ones
Yeah.
who are actually the good guys. You
Can
find out of
also, yeah.
allegations because they think they can get away with it.
Exactly.
So this is one
Yes.
aspect that you took a controversial topic and you took a bold stance there.
Yeah.
And that was kind of, I think, commendable is what I would say. Whatever you've handled, it's been handled in a very casual way. It's not been like the topic of homosexuality. Also, you've handled like trying to be too preachy about it. So that's
Yeah, I think that's thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that's been because I've never wanted to be preachy. And when we talk about, normalizing certain things, the only way it gets normalized is if you actually treat it like it is nothing special. So,
yeah,
like in this case, she has a friend who's gay, and no one ever makes a big
yeah,
deal about it. Like,
true,
he
true.
himself will sometimes make a joke and be like, oh, you're just like being like, when he is kind of
Yeah,
being intimate with someone in a house, and she's like, oh my God. And he's
yeah,
like, oh, you're only doing this because I'm gay. And she's like, please don't play that card with me and
yeah,
stuff. So it's a very normal, and these are the kinds of
yes,
conversations that friends would have. And for me, somehow as well, I think from the time I've grown up, I've always had gay friends, and
okay,
it's never been a big deal. And I still remember, in fact, when I was younger, because my parents were quite conservative, and there were
yeah,
times when I'd be like, oh, I'm going out with this friend, and with like say one of my gay friends, and then my dad would be like, you're going alone with this guy, and I would be like, hey, relax, daddy's gay. And then my dad would be like, how is it that all your friends are gay? And I'd just be like, it's fine, it's normal. And then again, in the book as well, her mom doesn't really get the
correct, yes,
concept of like a
yes,
person who's gay, which is a very normal
yeah.
thing for
The
someone from that
cupboard and all that,
generation,
the
right?
cupboard and the
Yeah.
closet
Yeah.
dialogue.
Yeah, so like these are things that parents kind of, you can't
Don't get it.
expect them to be
Yeah.
that evolved, or like,
No,
so
I
let's be
think
real
you
about
can't. I think after a certain age, it's very tough to change mindsets. Very few
Exactly.
are willing to change the mind because they've been conditioned for so long that
Exactly.
you can't expect them to instantly accept new
Right.
ideas.
Exactly.
That's fine.
Yeah, and so as a character, she's just like, listen, like I don't even expect my mom to get this,
Yeah.
so it's fine. And so that's the kind of thing that, that's why your characters become believable and real, I feel,
Yes.
because if it was the thing where her mom is all like, are very accepting of this, of her friend who's gay and stuff, it wouldn't, because at the end of the day, she is from a smaller town again. So when
Yeah.
when you grow up in a smaller sort of town with everyone talking and people gossiping and things like that, people tend to have a more narrow minded
Mm.
approach to things. They are not, you can't expect them to be, open minded and very well, like, accepting of things. So I think, yeah, so that's where you've got to stay true to your characters and keep those conversations real, keep the characters real. That's something I consciously tried to do as well here.
You're also the editor of a style magazine, a
Yes,
fashion
like a
magazine,
fashion
Style
website.
Can
Yeah.
Candy, yeah.
Yes.
And this book also deals with a bit of that because the lead
Yeah.
character is a stylist. So
Yes.
I'm guessing those parts are a bit of you as well. I mean, you are into fashion and style, is what I'm guessing.
So yeah, I did work in fashion. In fact, for me, it was actually more a realization when I worked in fashion that this is not necessarily something I'm loving or enjoying that much.
Okay.
Which is why I then, so for me, it's always been communication and
Okay.
in all
Okay.
forms.
Okay.
I've done radio, I've done TV, writing, of course, but I wasn't, while I was working at the fashion website, I realized that fashion per se is not necessarily
Not
my forte.
okay. Okay.
Yeah. So of course I enjoy fashion as much as the next person. Like I will
Yeah.
try to
A
keep up with
regular, yeah.
trends and wear things that are in fashion, but I'm not someone who is very like, oh, I'm gonna have like this edgy look today and like so into my fashion.
Because I was going to ask you who do you think is the most fashionable actor and actress in Bollywood right
Yeah,
now?
I can answer that question. I do follow enough of Bollywood to
Yeah.
kind of tell you that. So the most fashionable actor, right? Male. I think Ranveer Singh, because it's quirky and it's all over the place, but it is his own style. I feel like
Style, yeah.
everyone else then just follows this very
Yeah.
like basic whatever
Okay.
their stylist makes them wear. Yeah. So at least he's got his own like signature style. And in women, I think Sonam Kapoor did have like her own distinct sort of, at least she was experimental with, like, she isn't so much in the public eye now, but she
Yeah.
has been always pretty experimental with what she wears. And yeah, fashion was always her thing. So yeah.
Interesting. So, okay. Hmm. Um, your thoughts on the writer's strike, which is happening in Hollywood right now? Like, what are your thoughts on that? And what is your take on writers in the Hindi film industry? Is it the same as it's there, or things are better
Yeah.
here?
I think, see, for writers in general, and especially in, like, in fact, Hollywood is something which I wouldn't even necessarily be able to comment on because I don't have the experience of that. But when I look at Bollywood, I think writers are only now getting their due. At least in the last, I think then that's really changed in the last few years, especially with all the OTT platforms and all of that, that many more opportunities for writers. But I think before this, as much as we had Javed Akhtar, Salim Javed, you had writers writing really good scripts all along.
Exactly.
You've had writers writing really great scripts, but they never got their due as much. Where in terms of payment, the payment scales compared to actors and everything. And I think in the last few years, that is something that has really changed, where writers are now actually getting paid well and getting their due. And writers like Juhi Chaturvedi have really stood out with their scripts like Tiku, etc., where those are like proper writer driven scripts, and everyone knows who the script writer is. So I think that has really changed. I still feel like there is a long way to go, because still when it comes to a film, people are always more excited about who are the stars in it. And I have always felt that the script has to be the main star of the film, because if you can have all the biggest Bollywood stars, but if it's a bad script, it's going to be a bad movie, like no two ways about it. So so I wouldn't necessarily be able to comment on Hollywood and what's happening, but anything which writers are when writers are protesting for their rights, I'm always like, yes, of course, that's like our fraternity, so we do have to stick together. And I think writers definitely need to get more of their due, even more in Bollywood. Yeah, for sure.
Writers make the actors. It's not the other way around. A star cannot save a bad film at all. I mean, that's what I feel. I mean, and if
Yeah.
they do, it's like a fluke shot. It may become a
Yeah.
hit, but after a few years, nobody looks at it. So
Right.
it doesn't
Yeah,
have the
it's like
lasting
because
power.
correct, because I mean, your script are it's the bones of the film, right? And
Yeah,
then you've got your director who, if he does like a
yeah,
great job, you've got your actors who like a little more.
yeah,
So it is teamwork. There's no denying that. I mean,
yeah,
again, you have a great script, but then you have bad actors. They can
yeah.
also kill a great script. So it's
That's
so
so, no,
important for,
that's true. That's
yeah,
true. That's
yeah,
very true.
yeah.
And let me see 1 second. Yeah. Okay, what are the brutal truths that writers need to know before they enter this industry, the
Yeah.
publishing industry, the brutal
Yeah.
truths?
Oh yeah. Firstly, there is a lot of competition for sure. I
Hmm.
think just making sure if you're talking about books, then
Yeah,
just making
books.
sure that your book is out there and people are reading it. It takes a lot of effort. And this is for, when I was the first time author with my first book, I thought, okay, my bit is done. I've written the book, the publisher has published it, that's it, it's done. Then I realized, and especially in India, authors really have to spend so much more time on marketing as well, because your publishers can help you. They'll probably do a launch for you. They'll do a few like sort of online or offline sort of deals or events for you, but the rest of it's all up to you. So you've got to market your work, because then people, there's just every day new books coming out, so there's just so much competition in that sense, that this is something I feel like a lot of new writers may not necessarily know. How much time actually goes into kind of reaching out yourself and making those connections, trying to get your book out there, whether it's online or offline. So I think that is something I wish I knew earlier, but yeah, I think you also learn along the way, so that's fine too. And secondly, I think that writing takes a lot of discipline, because I think people have a lot of these sort of notions
Fancy
that, oh,
notions.
like I want to sit in the mountains and I'll wait for inspiration to strike and I need to sit there and do my work, and it doesn't work like that. Like for the majority of us, we're in the middle of our daily lives. We've got like the maid coming in, we've got something else happening.
Yeah.
All of that is happening, but you still have to disconnect and kind of create your manuscript. And it is a discipline. You actually do have to sit and do it all the time, even if you're not feeling inspired. And this is something which I had done this creative writing course where while I was writing my first book, I had kind of done a creative writing course, and our lecturer had said at that time as well that just keep writing, because even if you write like
I
you
know.
write 5,000 words, and even if like 3,000 of it is actually absolute
Crap.
rubbish, you'll be able to use the 2,000. And
Yeah.
sometimes I've also felt that you've written something, you thought you're going to write a book about a certain topic, you started writing, it wasn't clicking, you've abandoned it, but you never know, that particular idea can be used somewhere else, and those or that particular character can be used in another something else
Yeah.
that you create 3 years down the line. So nothing ever goes to waste. I think a writer should never feel that, oh my god, like I spent so much time, it didn't materialize. You really never know, you can use it somewhere else. So yeah.
Competition is something that you spoke about. So, in terms of competition, what do you mean? Is it from the fraternity? There's no support, or is it that it's tough to make it because there's so much of competition? Like, what do you mean by competition?
I think, yeah, no, I think I just mean like, for a new writer, especially,
Yeah.
you might get your book will get published,
For the
but then there are so many
marketing.
established, yeah,
Okay. The
yeah, there's
marketing
so many
part.
established, yes, and there's so many established names out there that I feel like sometimes even for readers, for them to take a gamble on a book
I
written by
know.
an author that they've never heard of.
I know.
When you walk into a store, you'd rather pick up a book from like an author whose name you've heard, right? So
Correct. Correct.
you'll see like a Paulo Coelho, Dan Brown, you'll see like Chetan Bhagat. So you'll see these names and you're like, oh yeah, this is safe. Like
Correct.
I know how they write, I know what they write, and yes. Whereas if you see a book by an author and you've never really heard of the author, you might just be like, I don't know how this is going to
I
be.
know. I know
So
that.
you may not take that chance. And that's something I always tell, and this is something even for me as a reader, because obviously I read a lot. I think you shouldn't just follow the bestseller list or
Trends.
just follow the
Exactly.
names, because you'll never be able to discover a book.
I think how much of it would be a money game? Like, the authors out there, are they pumping in a lot of money into it, or is it something marketing is not a numbers game? It also depends on how your marketing skills are.
I think, it's a combination. I mean,
It's a
obviously there
combination.
are some people who have like deeper pockets, they have bigger budgets, and then they're able to sort of put in that much more money into marketing their work. Whereas there are others, so everyone has their own approach towards this. Whereas there are other authors who are just like, no, I'll do my bit, I'll do whatever I can, but word of mouth will kick in, and people
Okay,
will
so you
pick it up.
don't really need to
And
spend the whole time. And we've seen books
yeah,
where you market, but it really doesn't sell or do that well, also, right? Because you have so many actors who have come out with books, but there's just one Twinkle Karna who's right there because everybody
right,
is coming up with a book of their own, but nobody's really made a mark like her. So I think
exactly,
somewhere you really need to be good at what you do also. You've got to pick your niche.
exactly. Yeah, I think like a book has to be good for sure. I mean, and then word of mouth does play a big role for sure. But again, marketing is important because you can write it. It's the
I
same as
know.
with any brand. You can
जो
have a great
दिखता है
product.
वो बिकता है जो दिखता
Exactly,
है वो
exactly. So
बिकता
I
है
feel like, yeah, the reality is just somewhere in between. And yeah, you've just got to kind of, do as much as you can, but then also move on to your next book, work on the next thing, keep moving and don't get stuck on that one thing.
Okay, and one last question. This is one question which I ask in all my episodes. One book that you would recommend to our viewers here.
I think I mean there are a lot of
I know,
obviously, so
I know.
it becomes
You
tough
can
to
no, you
sort of
can you can just name a few also instead of just
yeah,
one book. You can just name
yeah.
some of them.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about books that really influenced me and that I can still read, over and over again. So Pride and Prejudice by Jane
Yeah,
Austen. I feel like that was like this sort of
yeah,
starting point of like, women writing about
yes,
romance, but also not
yeah. The
just fully
pushovers.
mushy.
Yeah,
Yeah, romance, but also social issues, also,
yes,
reflecting the time that you're living in. So that, so yeah, so Pride and Prejudice for sure. Then I loved A Suitable Boy by Vikram
yeah.
Seth, and I was so excited when, the Netflix
Netflix.
adaptation came out. But although, like,
Did you like
really the
it?
book, the
Did you like
no,
the
it
adaptation?
couldn't do justice to, it definitely couldn't do justice to
Justice.
what the book was. Because I remember I was so excited about it and I was telling everyone, like, must watch. And then the people who watched it were like, eh. And I was like, no. And then I was like sad. And I was like, no, you actually should read the book. Like, that's when
Yeah.
you'll see the magic of, this whole world. So yeah, so that book for sure. And then I actually grew up reading a lot of Marion Keyes. So that's the genre that I write, which is light, sort of chick lit,
Yeah.
fun,
Yeah.
light reads. And what I always admired about her writing was that as much as there's the romance and there's the fun bits in the book, there was always a serious social issue also that she was dealing with, whether
Yeah.
it's drug addiction, whether it's depression, whether it's alcoholism. And I felt like it was so refreshing because these are real issues, but then she still managed to find humor
Yeah.
along the way in the book, so you don't so yeah, and that's when I realized that, so which is why I also get annoyed when people say that, oh, chick lit is just fluff
No.
and it's just superficial. It can't be. I mean, if you want to write a meaningful book, you have to write about
Yeah.
sort of serious relevant issues
No, but
also.
the thing is the hypocrisy is when guys do the same thing, it's like bromance, it's like cool,
Yes.
it's a very cool thing to do. But if the girls do
Yeah,
the same thing, it's like chicklet, it's got no stuff. I mean, it's got no sentiments and
right.
all that.
I
There's
know.
a bias
Yeah.
there.
And I've had, yeah, it's surprising. I mean, I've had so many men who've read my books and been like, oh, we like really connected with the characters. So there's this misconception that,
Yeah.
like people can't read, or boys or men are not interested in
Yeah.
reading, romance. I feel like if it's a good plot, it's an engrossing plot, anyone will get drawn to.
Yeah. I
So yeah,
think you've
you,
discussed everything that I wanted to ask you. I mean, you've answered
yeah,
them so well, and I hope
thank you.
we get to read more of you. I'm sure you have more books in the pipeline,
Yes. Yes.
and I wish you all the best.
Oh yeah, for sure. Thank you so much. I've actually really enjoyed this conversation. I think
Yeah,
it
same
felt like
here.
talking to a friend about
Yeah, same
my
here.
books as well as writing in general. So it's been
Yeah.
really fun. Thank
Thank
you.
you too. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for coming here, and I hope we do get to do more often shows like this
For
and get to
sure.
meet sometime in the future too. Who knows?
Oh yeah, for sure. Thank you.
So
Thanks,
thank
Tina.
you. Thank you, Anjali. Bye bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. I'm sure you enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed it too. The next episode will be dropping in very soon, so stay tuned for that. Until then, bye bye.